Good afternoon. Thanks for tuning in to the channel Final Bell on the Rural Radio Network. I'm Alex Makovica. Joining us on the phone today, JJ Lauby with Agri Management Systems based in Loomis, Nebraska, to break down today's market activity. A quick recap on how the day has traded. Corn off as much as 14 cents today. Beans also off about 10 to 12 cents on the board. And the wheat pit struggling down 4 to as much as 12 cents. JJ, let's just 30,000-foot perspective before we dive into the factors today. Give us your thoughts on today's market activity from a high level.
Yeah, good afternoon, Alex. Really, it was just kind of a no news is bad news kind of thing on the grains. I think there really wasn't any definitive news that should have led to these drops, in my opinion. Really, all the focus now is on weather and planting progress, and those things look to be really good right now.
Yeah, we'll get some updated numbers later this afternoon. Unfortunately, they're not ready right now, so we can't discuss them. But planting progress, I think it's going to be safe to say it is still ahead of pace, although we have gotten some rains across the growing region, at least here in Nebraska. What are the grains focused on right now? Are there any discussions about maybe prevent plant in some of these wetter areas? What are you hearing, JJ?
Well, I'm really not hearing anything as far as prevented plant goes. Typically we'll see a lot of that up in the Dakotas, and right now, this is still pretty early for them to get started planting. But they got a pretty good start. They didn't get a lot done last week. But they're still going to be ahead of average. I mentioned earlier this morning that maybe Ohio and southern Indiana and southern Illinois are lagging behind just because of too much moisture. But when you look at the state level numbers there, we're well ahead of pace over there. So I would expect numbers, in the mid 40% range on both corn and beans when we get the numbers this afternoon.
When you look at the wheat pits, especially on the international picture, I know they've had some weather challenges too. What's behind the pressure in the wheat pits today, given that they did have some weather challenges?
That's a very good question, Alex. It's a little perplexing to me. Worldwide weathers would seem to be supportive on the wheat. Our southern plains got a lot of rain in the last 6 to 7 days. Some might argue it's too much rain, and that wheat might not look very good in this report coming out this afternoon. But there was also news that Ukraine hit one of Russia's export facilities over the weekend, and did considerable damage from what I can tell. And, that should have maybe been supportive to our wheat. So the wheat's just, it's very perplexing to me right now.
Sticking with that international picture, a lot of activity obviously happening in South America. What weight is that having here on the markets in the U.S., JJ, or is most of what the U.S. markets are focused on domestic?
Well, that's interesting you brought that up. There was some reports out that maybe Argentina is going to have a record wheat crop this year. So that maybe could be what tipped the wheat over here today. But again, there just really wasn't a whole lot of negative news to make these markets do what they did today.
JJ, the bright picture here is that export sales are still strong, still positive. When you look at the big picture, what weight is that having on the trade?
That's right, Alex, especially on the corn. We're running about 30% above a year ago. Most of that business is coming from Mexico. We've got to keep in mind that they're still in a major historic drought down there. So they're going to need our corn. And, having the front months down like they were today, it's a little bit concerning. Maybe there's rumblings of somebody canceling some corn purchases, and that's why we saw the front months down double to compared to what the new crop was, down 14, 15 cents. And I hate to think that that's going to happen, but here's something else I've been thinking about lately is, all this tariff stuff, all the trade talk, all the rumors, eventually these countries are going to have to come to the table. These tariffs are going to get worked out. And I guess I got to take President Trump at his word that he's got the farmers' backs. And once these countries start wanting to make deals, I really believe that our ag commodities are going to be a big part of that. And so I think even though things look pretty bleak today, I really think down the road we'll see some better prices and some good opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I believe it is a week from today, JJ. We will have the May WASDE. Between now and then, what do you think the grains are focused on?
Well, I think from day to day, we're looking at weather and trade talk. On that WASDE report, that's going to be the first actual data that USDA is going to give us on the crop size for this year's wheat crop. So they're going to be really that's going to be our baseline number, and where we go from there is all going to be weather dependent. We're getting this planning wrapped up. Not wrapped up, we're half done, but looking at the forecast, there's going to be states that are nearly all done by this time next week, and then it's just going to be all weather, whether it rains or not.
All right, good place to end part one of this conversation. JJ Lauby with Agri Management Systems joining us for the Channel Final Bell this afternoon. We'll be back after the break to break down yet another higher day in the livestock trade. The Channel Final Bell brought to you by Channel Seed and your local Channel Seed Pro. Do remember trading of futures involves risk of loss and may not be suitable to all investors. We'll be right back after this.
Well, Friday, Alex, we saw record high prices paid on both the fat cattle and the feeder cattle. Fat's traded anywhere from $5 to $8 higher than a week ago, and the feeder cattle, I mean, who knows where the sky's the limit there, I guess. It's just historic. One thing about record high prices, and we're up here where, there's no resistance or support levels. Well, there's support levels, but there's no resistance levels up here. So how high this thing goes, who knows? We got to watch the box beef prices. We traded some cattle at $350 in the beef last week. This morning's print on the choice was $345. So, I mean, you do the math. Are the Packers making any money? Probably not. As any businessman knows, how long are you going to keep operating in the red? I really would expect to see them once we get through this initial rush here of grilling season coming on. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see them back up the kills a little bit, slow the chains down, and try to get control of the front end supply there.
Okay, I want to dive into that. You talked a little bit about some maybe trigger signs, some things to look for. What are you advising people do? Because as you had said when we were in break, this will eventually come back down, and it might come crashing down. It might slowly trickle down. What do people need to do, JJ?
Well, that's exactly right. When you're up here at record levels, we all know prices don't stay at records forever. It will come down. What's going to trigger that? Who knows? Is it some sort of black swan event? Is it a disease? Is it our economy slowing down enough that domestically we just quit buying beef as much as we have? Who knows? Who knows what the reason is? But one thing we do know is it will come to an end. Typically in the livestock markets, unlike the grains, where grains will kind of carve out a bottom, typically in livestock you'll see very sharp bottoms and very sharp tops. Now, one thing we need to keep an eye on here is as we keep making new contract highs in all these futures contracts, a day where we see a tremendously higher move followed by a drop in open interest the next morning, that's a very good signal that a market is getting close to a top. We're not there yet. But typically the highs and lows in the livestock come very quickly. as far as what I'm advising people to do right now is, I mean, you've got to cover your butt here. If you've got inventory that's open, count your blessings. You know, you've got up here to record levels, and there's things you can do to protect yourself, lock in profit, lock in more money than you've ever made on a critter before, with little to no risk. And if the market keeps going higher, great. You're gonna end up making more money when you sell that animal. But when this market tops, it may drop $20, $30, $40 before you even have a chance to realize it's happening. You know, it's just it's exciting, yet it's also a little bit scary too.
Cash trade last week, JJ, a bulk of that action happened on Wednesday, which is a little bit different than what typically happens, which is a Thursday, Friday development. How do you see that playing out this week?
You know, my contacts in the feedlot business or in the packing business are kind of they're sniffing around pretty hard right now, trying to get some cattle bought. Now, you might not hear that in the mainstream news, but out in the country, they are talking to feedlot managers and trying to get some cattle on the books. You know, we slaughtered a few more cattle last week than the week before, less than 1%, but the big picture there is on the lower slaughter, our beef production was actually higher. So that tells me that these cattle are big, and you know, if the packers do decide to start slowing down a little bit, that's going to maybe build up this front end supply a little bit, and that could be a sign of our top too.
All right, all things to think about this week in a week of trade. JJ Lauby with Agri Management Systems, based in Loomis, Nebraska, joining us for this conversation. You can contact JJ at 308-995-2235. The Channel Final Bell is brought to you by Channel Seed and your local Channel Seed Pro. And do remember, trading of futures and options involves risk of loss and may not be suitable to all investors. That's today's Channel Final Bell on the Rural Radio Network.